What truly happened atop Mount Sinai has echoed through the centuries in verses, rituals, and stained glass depictions. Thunder, lightning, smoke, a voice that shook the very stone. But perhaps we have only ever glimpsed the surface of the mystery. Because when we strip away the softened symbols, when we look past the metaphor, what Moses experienced may not have been divine in the traditional sense. It may have been something far stranger, something that has visited earth before, something that returns. The Book of Exodus tells us the mountain trembled violently. A thick cloud covered the summit. There was fire, smoke, and the blast of a trumpet growing louder and louder. But who, what, was blowing that trumpet? Fire that did not consume, smoke that obeyed command, and above it all, a voice not heard, but perceived. A presence so overwhelming that it was said no one could survive seeing it directly. Was this the presence of God? Or was it something so advanced, so alien, that it only seemed divine to those without the language to describe it? Moses, alone, ascends into this storm of phenomena. He enters the cloud. For 40 days and 40 nights, he does not eat or drink. When he descends again, his face is shining. The people are terrified. He has changed, not just spiritually, but biologically. His proximity to whatever dwelled on that mountaintop altered him. And this detail is not a metaphor. It's in the text. Exodus 34:29 says, "The skin of his face shone, because he had been talking with the Lord." But what causes skin to shine after exposure to a voice? Was this the afterglow of spiritual enlightenment, or the residue of radiation? The Ark of the Covenant, crafted according to precise instructions received on the mountain, was not merely symbolic. It was dangerous. It emitted power. Those who touched it improperly died instantly. Those who stood too close without protection were struck down. Inside the ark were the tablets Moses received. Outside it, a cloud hovered by day and fire by night. Wherever it rested, the people encamped. Whenever it moved, they followed. It was guidance, but it was also something else. It behaved like a device, mobile, directional, intelligent. The people called it holy. But holy and hazardous are not mutually exclusive, especially when holiness is mistaken technology. And then there's the voice that spoke from the cloud, not seen, but heard, commanding, loud, terrifying. Even Moses feared it. The people begged him to intercede, saying, "Do not let God speak to us, or we will die." Why would a voice carry such lethal weight? Was it a sound, pure and simple, or a frequency, a transmission that affected the body, not just the soul? Ancient alien theorists suggest this was not a god in the mythic sense, but an intelligence transmitting knowledge, law, structure, command, one that Moses could interface with, but others could not. He was chosen, not for holiness, but for resilience. Throughout the Exodus narrative, the mountain is off limits. Barriers are erected. Anyone who crosses them dies. Even animals. Why such extreme measures? Why cordon off the mountain if the danger is merely spiritual? Unless what dwelled atop Sinai was physical, potent, emitting something harmful to unprepared life. A controlled access point, a containment field, a ship, a gate, a descent point, or perhaps a place where two realities touched, a rift between realms, and Moses entered it. Other clues begin to form a pattern. The instructions Moses receives are architectural, mathematical, ritualistic. He is told how to build the ark, how to clothe the priests, how to prepare the sanctuary. Not in vague terms, but with schematics, dimensions, materials, the language of engineers, not mystics. Who was giving him these blueprints, and for what purpose? We often picture the commandments as moral declarations, but what if they were protocols? Not just rules for behavior, but rules for contact, for survival, for continued interaction. You must not kill. You must not steal. You must not lie. Not only because these are good, but because they are prerequisites for coexistence with something beyond us. Perhaps Sinai was not just a moment of covenant, but calibration. Even the location itself raises questions. Mount Sinai, or Jebel al-Lawz, has long been contested. The traditional site lacks many of the described features, but in Saudi Arabia, a mountain exists that is scorched black at the peak, burnt stone in a desert of untouched rock. Local tradition calls it Jabal Musa. It is surrounded by petroglyphs, by stone circles, by caves that suggest ancient ritual, forbidden to visitors for decades. Why? What did Moses really see on Mount Sinai? Did he commune with a spiritual force, or did he make contact with an intelligence capable of altering his biology, instructing his people, and terrifying his followers into obedience? Was the law from heaven or from the stars? The question may never be answered completely, but the pattern is there, etched into the tablets, the ark, the cloud, the voice, the fire. Moses saw something that changed him, that much is clear. But whether it was divine revelation or alien technology wrapped in the language of faith, that depends on whether you believe the ancients only imagined or remembered. Because what Moses saw may return, and when it does, it will not need to speak. It will only ask, "Have you kept the covenant?" And we will remember the mountain, the cloud, the voice, and the man who walked into the fire and came out shining. But the story does not end on Sinai. In truth, it may not have begun there either. To understand what Moses saw, what he stood before, we must look further back. Beyond Exodus, beyond Egypt. Back to a time before laws and lineages, before covenant and command. Back to the days of Enoch the scribe, because long before fire crowned a mountain, fire fell from the sky. And long before Moses climbed toward revelation, others descended toward temptation. In the Book of Enoch, we are told of the watchers, beings sent not to rule, but to observe, sent not to interfere, but to document. They were called sons of heaven, but they became something else. They broke protocol. They mingled with the daughters of men. They shared knowledge not meant to be shared, metalworking, enchantment, astronomy, cosmetics, violence. The earth changed. Humanity accelerated, but it came at a cost. Their offspring, the Nephilim, were giants in form and spirit. Hybrid beings, neither fully human nor entirely divine. Unstable, powerful, corrupt, and the world spiraled. The flood, as described in Enoch, was not only divine punishment, it was a reset, a decontamination procedure. Earth had been altered, genetically, spiritually, perhaps irreversibly. The Watchers had interfered in the human genome. They had seeded something unintended, something that threatened the balance of life, and so a purge, a wash, not to erase sin metaphorically, but to clean the slate biologically. This casts Noah's survival in a new light. Genesis 6:9 says, Noah was perfect in his generations, not just righteous, but genetically intact, his bloodline untainted. He was preserved, not only for his faith, but for his code. In this view, the ark becomes a vessel of biological continuity, preserving the original human template amidst the flood of hybrid corruption. So, when Moses stands atop Sinai generations later, receiving tablets from the same intelligence that once sentenced Earth to a flood, we are not witnessing the birth of law. We are witnessing the reintroduction of protocol. A second attempt, a controlled re-engagement with humanity, a system reset from a failed experiment. Sinai becomes not a summit of religion, but a terminal, an interface, where Moses, like Enoch before him, becomes the go-between, the messenger, the calibrator of two species. And perhaps that's why the Ark of the Covenant carried such power. It wasn't just sacred, it was dangerous. It radiated, it communicated, it killed. Only the high priest could approach it, and even then under strict conditions. Like a reactor, like a transmitter, like a relic from a world that once touched ours and pulled away. And if we look even closer, we begin to see the terrifying symmetry. Enoch was taken to the heavens, shown layers of reality, mechanisms of creation, and prisons of the fallen. Moses entered the cloud, received dimensions, instructions, protocols. Enoch judged the watchers. Moses judged the golden calf. Enoch warned of the flood. Moses warned of the wrath. Enoch was a bridge. Moses, too, both altered by contact, both chosen for clarity, both returned changed. But what if neither was chosen by a god in the traditional sense? What if they were selected by something far older, far stranger, something that has visited again and again, each time under new names? What if the flood was the failsafe, and Sinai was the reboot? The law given to Moses may have seemed moral, but beneath the surface, it may have been technical, a set of behaviors necessary for coexistence, for uplift, for continued interaction. And if that's true, the stakes are higher than we thought, because if the protocols are broken again, if humanity once more drifts from the design, the question is not whether judgment will come, but whether it will be another flood, or something worse. Moses saw fire, but it did not consume. He heard a voice that shattered stone. He built a device that hummed with danger. He carried knowledge that reshaped a people. But all of it had happened before. In another age, with another witness, and another fall. And so, the pattern whispers again. Watchers descend, laws are given, boundaries are broken, judgment comes. Then silence, until it repeats. And if it repeats again in our time, when the sky opens, when the voice returns, when the fire descends, what will we say we did with what was left behind? Because Moses may have carried the tablets. But it was Enoch who saw the blueprint. And the flood wasn't just history. It was the warning. And warnings, when forgotten, do not vanish. They wait. In stones, in stories, in encoded scriptures misread as metaphor. The Book of Enoch was buried not just by time, but by intent, hidden from the canon, rejected by the councils, lost for centuries until it surfaced once more, as if on cue, in a time when we were beginning to look upward again. Because the watchers may be bound, but the memory of their fall is not. And the pattern, the cycle, remains. Humanity climbs toward heaven, crafts tools of knowledge and power, and teeters once more at the edge of interference. We manipulate genetics. We build machines that think. We reach into the atom and rewrite the code of life. And still, we act as though it's the first time. But it isn't. The flood was not myth. It was maintenance, a sterilization of corrupted strands. The offspring of watchers and humans, the Nephilim, were more than aberrations. They were a breach, a genetic contradiction. And once created, they could not be unmade, only washed away. But even the flood did not cleanse everything. Traces remained, in bloodlines, in bones, in behavior. The Old Testament giants, the stories of monstrous kings, the whispers of men who could speak with the sky. And now we stand in a new age, one of digital temples, synthetic life, and telescopes peering into the void. An age where the fire of Sinai might arrive not in a cloud, but in code. Where the ark is not a gilded chest, but a signal, a transmission waiting to be received again. The connection between Enoch, the flood, and Moses is not one of isolated wonder. It is a timeline of contact. The watchers altered us. The flood corrected us. Moses recalibrated us. And now the silence is thinning. The veil that separated myth from memory is being pulled back by data, by archaeology, by dreams. The stories are converging, and so are the signs. We see it in the global echo of celestial visitors, in the pyramids aligned to the stars, in the cave paintings that show men reaching up to beings who descend in flame, in the texts, Sumerian, Vedic, Mayan, Hebrew, all describing entities who come from the heavens bearing knowledge and judgment. And so we must ask, was the law of Moses the final word, or just the latest update? Was Sinai the last summit, or merely the last we remembered? Because if what descended once chooses to return, if the watchers rise again, not as rebels, but as reminders, then this time they will not come bearing stone tablets or floodwaters. They will come with the reckoning of repetition. They will come asking why we did not learn, why we forgot the flood, why we silenced Enoch, why we worshipped the form but ignored the function. And we will have no answer, only questions. Why did Moses shine? What was the voice? Who truly wrote the law? And more urgently, are we repeating the same error? Because the line between divine and technological may only exist in the eye of the unprepared. Because what the ancients called gods, we may one day recognize as ancestors or wardens. And because in the end, it may not be faith that saves us, but memory. The watchers fell for love, for curiosity, for interference, and humanity paid the price. Now we reach into realms they only glimpsed. We touch the strands of life. We teach machines to think. We climb towards stars that once watched over us. And somewhere, beyond our satellites, beyond our science, beyond our stories, the eyes of the watchers may open once more. Not to judge, not to teach, but to see what we've become. And when they do, they may not speak with fire or cloud. They may not descend with trumpets or light. They may only ask, "Did you remember the mountain?" And in that moment, Moses and Enoch will no longer be myth. They will be the first and the last warning, the past repeating and the future arriving. But what did Moses actually see? When the fire consumed the summit of Sinai and the mountain trembled beneath his feet, was it glory or was it guidance cloaked in fearsome light? Was the voice he heard truly ineffable, or was it modulated, measured, calibrated to reach the mind of a Bronze Age shepherd in a way he could grasp? Could Moses have known the difference between divine presence and advanced presence? Between a being of omnipotent spirit and one of ancient technology so far beyond comprehension that it would appear, by every measure, godlike? And the truth is, he couldn't have. Moses, like Enoch before him, like Ezekiel after, could only interpret what his senses allowed. Light became glory, smoke became holiness, the structured commands etched in stone became covenant. But what if what he encountered was not an abstraction, but an interface, a calculated delivery of instruction, ritual, and boundaries from an intelligence that understood something Moses could not, that to influence a civilization, you must speak its language, and in that time, in that place, the language of the divine was law, spectacle, and fear. But now, ask, can we? Even today, with satellites and string theory, with quantum computing and AI, with all our pride of progress, could we truly distinguish a God from a sufficiently advanced intelligence? Arthur C. Clarke warned us, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And yet, when we read Exodus, that's exactly what we see. Fire that descends, clouds that speak, stone tablets written by a hand unseen. A device so powerful and sacred it kills those who touch it unprepared. A shining face, a mountain that becomes a conduit. If these things happen today, what would we say? A military encounter, a classified craft, a communication from a non-terrestrial species? Would we reduce Sinai to a site of contact? Would we call it a spiritual hallucination? A mass encounter event? A field test? We, who claim to know more, may be no more equipped than Moses to interpret such a thing. Because knowledge does not equal comprehension, because progress does not ensure wisdom. The frightening truth is this: we still don't know how to define the divine. We don't know if what we call spiritual is merely a higher form of science. We don't know if consciousness is a product of biology, or if biology is merely a vessel for something far older. So when Moses stepped into the cloud and emerged transformed, shining, altered, what did he really witness? A divine download? A neural calibration? Exposure to an energetic field that rewrote something inside him? We can only guess. And maybe that's the point. Perhaps we were never meant to decode it, only to preserve it, to carry the stories like time capsules, waiting for a generation who could finally ask the right questions. Who would dare to say, what if this wasn't religion as we thought, but revelation of another kind? And that is the razor's edge we walk now. For if we admit that Moses saw more than myth, then we must admit that our ancestors weren't naive, that their gods may have been real, but not in the way we imagined, that their temples may have been launch sites, their arks may have been containers of contact, their prophecies not divine poetry, but transmission. And if Moses couldn't tell the difference between miracle and machine, if we, thousands of years later, still hesitate to ask the question, then perhaps we are not ready. Perhaps that's why they left. Perhaps that's why the covenant was conditional. Because power, without understanding, becomes myth, and myth, mistaken for truth, becomes dogma. And dogma becomes danger. So we return to the mountain, to the moment the sky touched earth, and we ask again, not to dismiss the sacred, but to see it clearly. What did Moses really see? Was it God? Or something older? Something sent to protect us, to monitor us, to warn us? And if it returns, will we know the difference this time? Or will we fall to our knees and miss the message again?